Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited that you're able to join us today, and I value your time very much. I'd like to invite you to become a follower and supporter of the Growing Band Director podcast. You can follow us on social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube by going on growingband.com and clicking on any of those to follow us. You can also find on there now a new merchandise store, which has the Growing Band Director podcast logo and some sayings on lots of different items on there for men and women, and there's things from t-shirts and sweatshirts to other clothing and accessories. Lots of different options on there with lots of different sizes and colors. Again, a little bit of that money comes back to us at the podcast to help us keep some content going for you. Finally, I'd like to invite you to become a Patreon member. This is a listener-supported show, which means we don't take any ads besides this one. Instead, we rely on listeners like you to keep us going, right? The way to support us is by going to growingband.com and clicking on the Patreon banner. And you can choose either $5 a month, $3 a month, and you'll gain access to the episode notes as well as an audio file of every episode we've done. Among other things, this is where you'll find our repertoire list and all the different repertoire podcasts we've done in the past and will do in the future. So whether it's by clicking on Patreon, following us on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, going to the merchandise store on growingband.com and ordering something for yourself or some family or friends, and also sharing the show with some other people. We really, really appreciate you being part of the show, and please reach out at any point, and there's a way to do that on growingband.com as well on the Contact Us button. Anyways, let's get to the show. I hope you enjoy it. Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. My name is Kyle Smith, and joining me is my friend and colleague, Jeff Smith. Our mission is to share practical advice and explore topics that will help every band director, no matter your experience level, as well as music education students who are working to join us in the coming years. Together, we will discuss many aspects of a well-rounded band program, but most importantly, we will discuss concepts that help us all improve our own programs each and every day. Always remember the famous quote by Ray Kroc: "When you're green, you're growing, and when you're right, you rot." Let's get started. All right, welcome back, everybody, to episode 53 of the Growing Band Director podcast. Very happy to be here with a very good friend and mentor of mine, Terry White. For any band directors who are out there, if you don't know Terry's name, there's something wrong with you.
Maybe there isn't.
I'm hoping this is going to be two great episodes that we're going to do. This first one's going to be on teaching the Jazz Ensemble. And if you don't know Terry, a little bit about Terry from my end, then he's going to give you his spiel. Terry, how many marching band shows have you arranged? Hundreds.
Yes.
20 just for me. And so you make every band sound, I think they're optimal.
I try.
Yeah.
It's been years of experience, and some of my earlier ones from my own bands were not hits, but got us through the season.
Yep. And then originals in the concert band realm, are there arrangements as well?
Not many arrangements because of the whole copyright thing, but probably a dozen or so as far as published.
Yep.
There's more that are self-published.
Yeah. And a lot of people know you from the Jazz Idiom.
Right. I'm approaching about 60 published, and there's far more than that sitting on my computer.
Right. Yeah. So real quick, as people want to know more of your stuff, how would they reach out to you if they want to see or hear some of your unpublished stuff?
My website's twhitemusic.com. You go to there, and that will link you to the published things that will take you right to Pepper, and you can see the scores and so forth. And then I have some scores and recordings on the non-published or self-published things on the website, so it's pretty easy to navigate.
And you also custom write for anybody who's asking.
Yes.
Yes.
Within reason and time frame.
Right.
I retired for a reason.
But you can say, hey, I'd like a chart on this tune and this key, and here's the ability level of my band, and
right. Yeah, that's helpful.
Unless it's giant steps, you can make it work.
Yeah, and as long as I just encourage people be honest. It's there's so many times that people have higher expectations of their band. They'll tell me their lead trumpet player, he can hit a high C. Well, if he can't in October, there's a good chance he's not going to in March either. So,
and just because he or she may have done it once
yes,
doesn't mean
that's right. Yeah, and then that makes things a lot more challenging, and for the ensemble you're writing for, oh, you can write anything for my group. Well, not really. I heard your group. It's, let's back it off a little bit. So,
tell us about your teaching experience.
I'm very fortunate. I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet. And I went to music school. I went to Berkeley. And I always wanted to be a band director. That's what I wanted to do. But I also wanted to write. So I went to Berkeley as a composition major. And after I graduated, I enrolled at the University of New Hampshire to get my master's degree in music education so I could get certified to teach. And I was fortunate enough to get hired in Westbrook and have two really wonderful people be my mentors. Don Doan was the elementary school band director, and Norm Richardson was the director of music and the high school band director, and also had been my high school band director for a couple of years at Falmouth High School. So with their guidance, it kind of pointed me in the right direction and got me through all my beginning teacher mistakes and some great advice from both of them.
And some great stories that we can't necessarily tell.
No, not all of them anyway. And it's easy to look back now and chuckle over them, but at the moment it was devastating to me. Mm-hmm. But to have someone like Don sit down, Don's not one who would ever say, "Hey, you ought to do this, you ought to do that." He'd open his statement with, "Do you mind if I tell you something?" And that's when you just better brace yourself because you're probably screwed up. And he's just in a very nice way going to walk you through it and help you out. And back in those days too, I mean, the Westbrook program was really strong and a lot of good players going through there. And we had a lot of great administrators who allowed us to do the crazy things we did and get away with it would never be allowed today because they believed in what we were doing for the kids. Mm-hmm. So.
Tell the world a little bit about Don Doan.
Don Doan is an amazing human being. He was a great athlete here in Maine, won the top basketball award, I believe, in 1949, went to Boston University on a wrestling scholarship, but majored in music education. Hmm. Later on, went on the road with Maynard Ferguson for a few years, and then Woody Herman, and settled down with his wife and 4 kids and became the elementary band director in Westbrook.
Imagine being a 5th grader or whatever and having Don Doan as your band director.
You run into kids today who are adults mm-hmm. that just worship the ground. And he was tough. Don was a unique person. He loved young kids and elderly people. He was in between. You took your chances with him. Mm-hmm. But no, he was wonderful with kids, and I learned a lot from Don. I think one of the quotes, my first day teaching, I was at Westbrook Junior High getting ready to do 7th and 8th grade, having no idea. I never student taught. I just walked into the room and did my thing. And Don came over and says, "Hey, I just want to wish you luck in your first day in your career. Just remember, there are no bad bands, just bad band directors. Have a good day." And he and Norm were great about things like that, the one-liners and the humor. But you could go to them for any advice. Many times I would go to them thinking, this is it, my last day teaching, and they're going to fire me, and things are fine.
Yeah.
So I taught for about 33 years after that in a couple different school systems, and wrote along the way for my own groups, and then started writing for other groups, and then a couple of my jazz band things got published by Alfred back around 2003, and that just opened the door for a lot of things. So
I went back and looked at, and I wrote down all of the publishers who were published with. Can you tell me if I miss any? So I wrote Grand Mesa, Ludwig Masters, Alfred, Ben Aldridge, Barnhouse, Winger Jones.
Mark Manduca has a catalog as well. And of course, the new ones are Chelsea, which is run by Larry Clark of Carl Fisher. And they've now absorbed Wingert Jones and Kendor. So, and on first glance, I've been with him about a year now, and it's pretty amazing some of the things he's doing. My jazz editor is Blair Bayuski, who people know as Peter Blair as a jazz writer. And it's been great writing for them. So a lot of good insight. And every publisher is different. Their expectations are different. When you write for Alfred Concert Band and Robert Sheldon was the editor, I sent him stuff that, oh man, this is great. There isn't one thing out of place. And I'd get the email and 3 pages later of, you need to change this, you need to change that. And it was just more editing stuff. And he was a perfectionist. And it really raised my bar a lot after that. So, and just about, when I was about 57 or 58, the writing thing was going extremely well, very busy, to the point where I was going to have to start saying no. I was still teaching full-time in Cape Elizabeth. And my wife and I had a chat, and we said, why don't you retire, take a couple of years of early retirement? And because in that line of work, once you say no, they don't call you back. They'll find another writer. So a little bit of a gamble, but it paid off in the long run. So yeah, I have no regrets about that at all.
And music education is better because of that choice.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I try to put myself, in fact, I still write charts, and I see my own Cape kids playing those charts. Well, Billy couldn't play that lick, so we'll make it this rhythm or whatever.
But your experience as a teacher is what allows you to write such appropriate level
I
music.
think so. Yeah. I think so. And something that Herb Pomeroy taught me at Berkeley, I took all of his various courses in line writing. You've got to put yourself in the player's position. For years, if you played stock charts and you were the second tenor player, that part was a drag. I mean, it was boring, repetitive notes, difficult to play because it was so angular. You got all the leftover notes in the chord. And Herb had a whole set of rules to get you around that and think about the player first. So that's something we can talk about when we talk about writing. So.
Yeah. And remind me, I want to know if there's a place to access those rules at this point.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. You also do a lot of judging.
I do, and I really enjoy it. It's my kid fix. I love to go in and work with bands and do the clinics.
It's like being a grandfather, I can imagine. You kind of walk in and help, and you're out.
It's interesting. There are some band directors that are great. Do whatever you want with my group, and we try some things. We maybe talk about improv. I spend a lot of time talking about dynamic contrast because in general, bands do play too loud, and but put everything in perspective. And then you have some other bands that the director gets a little sensitive about anything you do with this group. We're not there to make them look bad. I think a comment, it was probably Aaron Bush made the comment, and John Mastriani both said, you can't know everything. And you learn from everybody. Every clinic I do, I see and talk to band directors, and there's always a new take on things. And you don't be afraid to learn and ask questions, and nobody has all the right answers. It's more suggestions and an approach to teaching. I'm a much better teacher now, retired, than I was, 40 years ago when I was teaching 7th and 8th grade band. Because back then I didn't put the kid first. I put me first. Wrong notes was, made me look bad. And, after a while you mature enough and you realize this is about kids. It's not about me. So that's been a whole approach. When I go to a concert and I have to get on the microphone, it's, talk about the kids. Parents don't want to hear about me. They want to hear about what their kids are doing, and if the kids are having fun and they look good and sound good, that's the most important thing to them.
So in your time judging, you mentioned bands play too loud.
Yes.
My band as well.
We all do.
Our bands,
and especially if you get microphones involved and all of that. And that was a concept that I learned from Herb as well. You don't have to do drastic changes, but when you set the bar for your fortissimo, set it where the band can really handle that and play in tune and play in good balance, and then back everything else down and make that contrast in phrases and so forth. Sometimes people do that and it's too dramatic. It sounds like somebody's playing with the volume controls and it's overmixed. But think about the shadings and how soft can you get this to be. I've done that a lot with some concert bands at the festivals, especially middle school groups, because they have a tendency to narrow their window of dynamic range, right? So it's mezzo forte plus or minus,
And we can all play softer than we think we can play.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And we sound much better sometimes when we play softer. We have a lot more air in the horn and not overblow. It's And that wasn't something I learned till later on. You know, we all got into the loud, high, fast thing and the jazz stuff, especially at the festivals. And I remember hearing, I'm old enough that I can remember the tail end of the big band era. And I heard everybody's band live. You know, I heard Basie, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, because you hear Buddy Rich. But they could play loud, high, and fast because they could play in tune. They played with a certain intensity that was the style of that band. But you could hear Duke's band. It was, you know, if you put them side by side, it was totally different. Here in Portland, it was back in the 80s, I think, when they had the Portland Expo. Woody Herman's band and Buddy Rich's band had the, quote, battle of the bands. Boy, two dramatically different groups. And it wasn't that it was loud, it was mature. You know, good, strong, professional players. Well, kids hear that and they try to do the same thing, and it's just not going to happen.
So what was the difference between those two bands?
The writing, to start with. Woody's band was doing more of popular, like Light My Fire, MacArthur Park, things like that. I'm trying to stay relevant to the younger crowd. The Buddy did what he did, the straight ahead jazz, in your face thing. In fact, one of my former classmates from Berkeley was playing piano that night. And where we were sitting, Buddy seemed to, between tunes, be talking to the bass player, kind of wiping his face with a towel and saying things. And afterwards, I went out with the piano player, and I said, "Gee, Buddy had a lot to say to the bass player." He said, "Yeah, he got fired on the way to the bus." He said, "That's our 11th bass player in 13 months." He said, "That's the kind of pressure and the intensity level of that band." Because we've all heard the stories of how, but that was the bar that Buddy set. He wanted that level of intensity. But the part I liked about the band was Buddy's taste in ballads was amazing. You know, you wouldn't think a drummer would care, you know, about playing a ballad, but the writing of the ballads was fantastic. You know, Basie's band came, and that was a whole different style. It's different when you hear them live than on YouTube like we do now. So I was very fortunate that way to be part of that process, and because Maynard came here many times due to Craig Skeffington's efforts. So I think we don't have those live bands anymore. There's Gordon Goodwin's band, but that's a whole different thing. And those were road bands, and you know, night after night after night, it was a whole different thing. That was their life. And in jazz band, that's not the same thing. Jazz ensemble and festivals. I think a lot of the better bands are gearing themselves more teaching the art of jazz and the different styles and so forth. And that's more important than the bowling trophy.
Being a jazz musician rather than being in a jazz band.
Because many of these kids, they're not going to play. You know, they might play in college, or, you know, hopefully it would be nice if they played in a community band. But you're educating your future audience. You know, there are going to be a lot hipper kids out there in that audience, and they're going to totally get what the ensembles are doing. So that's a hard sell to band directors at festivals. It really is.
So as a judge who's listened to all different levels of bands, ages of bands, levels of bands, our bands play too loud. That's number one. What else?
More focus needs to happen on improvisation, even the middle school level. There are bands who will have the one-trick pony, the kid that can really nail it, usually the lead alto player or somebody like that.
And it's one kid.
It's one kid, and nobody else gets the solo.
I will just put a quick plug in. We have had a number of jazz improvisation episodes recently, so if anybody listening or watching hasn't heard those, they should go back and look for them. I don't know. I'm trying to remember which ones they were. Nick Manila, and Mike Sakash,
and John Mastriani.
Yeah. And we did some of that too with Aaron Bush as well.
With the improvisation, and that's a long process. I mean, you have to be honest right up front. You're not going to teach a kid to play even in a year. You'll be better at the student will be better at the end of the year. But it's a process, and you need to have a program in place. And there are so many tools now that we didn't have. You know, as a kid growing up, I had Music -1, and they weren't really hip jazz tunes. You play the record, and you play the melody, and there was no Jamie Abersol or Band in the Box and all these tools. But kids and teachers need a roadmap. You know, which one works best for you? Is it melody-based improvisation? But if you really are into the festivals, especially like combo, I I mean, 40 points out of 100 is improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you send your one kid that can really play through the horn and up there. But also there's that little line in that caption that says opportunity for a variety of soloists. You know, as a judge, I want to hear kids that are just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
You're not comparing them to the real hot player. And does the kid really, have a clue? If he's playing blues, if he's playing the blues scale, that's okay to start. But even in the right key,
mm-hmm.
There are some people who think you just go out there and tell a kid, play what you feel. Well, you're setting the kid up for disaster.
I will say I try to practice what I preach on this podcast, the Growing Band Director. Like, since I came back from Foxborough, that first Monday, and since then it's been 5 weeks, and every one of my kids in the jazz ensembles and the jazz class, every single day has improvised since then. That rhythm train method where you give them a rhythm, and whether they're playing certain chord changes, major, minor, dominant, or they're playing on the notes of the melody, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But having every kid group improvise every single day, I think it's just changing our culture. And that even now, when I say, okay, we're going to run through this tune and you are going to solo, sometimes it's still like, oh, deer in the headlights, but you just go through it. And no matter how they do, you just keep going. And I think that culture will embed as we go in my program, and there will be more and more kids soloing.
And I think
you just got to do it.
It almost doesn't matter what you do, but do something. Good things will often happen by mistake, and that's okay. When I first went to Cape, they didn't have a middle school jazz program at all. And so we started one for 8th graders. Well, we had so many kids sign up. We had 2 8th grade jazz bands, and they met before school. And then I sort of had to work with the parents a little bit because they had to get rides to school. So I had to juggle some kids who rode with other kids. So they were in the band. They weren't really juggling because they thought the Tuesday band was better than the Thursday band or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then after a year, I had 7th grade parents coming to me saying, can my kid get in the jazz band? So, well, it's really only for 8th graders, at this point. So I started a 7th grade jazz class. Anybody could come. And over time, that was a great way for me to start kids on drum set who had never had any experience, bass players, piano players that only ever played Mozart, they hadn't. And I would write out chord voicings for them to learn. And we would learn tunes, taps, Miller, undecided, blues tunes and blues heads, all in unison. And we would get them started. And my approach was similar to Don's, melody based. But then I would say to the kids, okay, we're gonna learn to improvise today. Here's your note. What do you mean? That's all we can play is one note? Yeah, and it's going to be a right note. Your solo is going to have all right notes in it. You're going to play this note. You can change octaves. You can put any rhythms to it. And then we would add a note and give them all the notes.
Like the 1 and the 2 or the 1 and the 3 or something like that, yeah.
And I'd have them all play together. I mean, it was total chaos. It was like the beginning of band rehearsal, everybody warming up.
But you're thinking about what they're learning, not what it sounds like.
Right. And I told the kids, play what you really want to play because nobody's listening to you. There's so much going on. And after a while, they would develop confidence.
Yep.
I mean, you've done middle school jazz festivals where you say to the kids on a blues tune, who wants to solo? Well, every kid puts his hand up.
Yeah.
High school kids won't do that because they're mature enough to know I can sound terrible, and so I'm not going to do this. But middle school kids, they don't know. They'll play anything. They're fearless. So
that simplicity that I just want to highlight, like one note, at the very least, and if you just improvise it in the B flat scale for a month, and they're only using 1 or 1 2 or 1 2 3, like just simple. It's not magic.
Right.
You just take something they're very confident with and let them push that boundary. And once they can do something in there, then you just expand the box a little bit.
So at the end of the 7th grade year, that was when those kids had a chance to perform. We didn't make it. You didn't learn charts or anything like that. In fact, we even let the kids decide which tunes were going to be on the program. They could learn like 10 or 12 tunes.
So they were head charts. They just played the head. And
exactly right. And I would teach the parents, this is what your kid has been learning before school. This is the improvisation process that we use. It's a slow but steady process. And I said, you can go downtown to a local music store and buy this book. It tells you about the blues scale. And so for $14.95, I would go to the piano, of course, and play the 4th, which sometimes is on the blues scale, because I would exaggerate it and nail it right on the chord and sound like a train wreck. And I kept banging. I say to the parents, does that sound good? And they're all, no. I said, well, you just paid $14.95. I told you that was okay to do. And that's not right for the kids to learn. Yeah, it's appropriate when you're a mature player and you know how to use it. So we would teach the kids what I thought was the slow but proper way. 8th grade kids, we actually had an 8th grade combo because I had so many kids playing, and we had 2 rhythm sections, but I had one 8th grade jazz band. And I hated to have kids sit around. So I said, why don't we start a combo? And I took the stronger rhythm section. It was just piano, bass, guitar, and drums. And then after a couple of weeks, I had an alto player come up and said, Mr. White, can I be in combo? Sure. Then we had another trumpet player came. That was 4 horns. So now we teach the kids how to do all, play the head, count their own tunes off. And at the end of the year, we would go to the district jazz festival. We had never gone to festivals. Went for comments only, and I handed the adjudicators 12 tunes. I said, the kids know these 12 tunes. You guys pick the program.
That's awesome.
And the judges got weirded out.
That's awesome.
Just pick the program. And I went up and sat on the PA speaker by the piano. The kids counted off the tunes, and they learned how to fix things if they got screwed up.
Yep.
Those kids stayed together all the way through Cape High School. And I mean, they were very, very successful. They did gigs outside. And their mentor at the high school was Ralph Norris, who was a solid tenor player. We were just talking about it at lunch yesterday, how Ralph just thoroughly enjoyed playing with those kids. Mm-hmm. And the great story about those kids, how hip they were, when Ralph took them over, they had won previously in the year before at the State Jazz Festival. And Mr. Norris, I said, you see this? And they brought out a trophy. And he said, what's that for? He said, well, we won first place at the State Jazz Festival. Ralph says, I've been playing over 50 years. I never got a trophy. And so they named, and he said, it was just basically tough. And so they nicknamed it the TS Combo. At the end of the season, at the cabaret, they played their tunes, and they went to give Ralph an award. They somehow found this 4-foot bowling trophy. They brought it out and awarded it to Ralph because he'd never had a trophy. So those kids found great humor, and they played music for all the right reasons because mm-hmm. it was fun. It wasn't about trophies or any of that stuff. So that's when the process works.
Yep.
But we started that in 7th grade, and the payoff came later in high school.
I will say, too, that when I was meeting with Nick Manila, he mentioned something I had never done before. I had always done like the major pentatonic, and then you flat the third on the 4-chord kind of thing. He has kids just go 1, 2, flat 3 on all of it, mm-hmm. and then use the major 6th below, right, to approach as an approach tone instead of 7. And he said it sounds more bluesy, and you can sound great on that before you start changing the major 3rd and the minor 3rd.
Right.
I had never heard that before. I've always changed with the chord changes. So again, that was against what I had always taught. And I'm not saying I'm only going to teach it that way, but it was just nice to hear your perspective, nice to hear Nick's perspective, nice to have my own perspective.
And I'm not really a jazz player.
Yeah.
I mean, I could improvise, and I could fool a lot of people on certain things. And as a teacher, I was fortunate. I had Don Doan. Don Doan taught improvisation at Westbrook for years. My own son studied with him later on after Don retired. And Don's approach was a little bit different. It was melody-based, yeah. heavily on the pentatonic scale. And
so melody-based meaning you improvise over the melody.
Yeah, learn the melody first.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many kids I run into that are playing at festivals. They couldn't play the melody of the tune if they had to. Mm-hmm. You got to start there, because if mm-hmm. all else fails, you can at least play the melody and embellish it. Mm-hmm. But later on, and I was about 40 years old, and Don had retired, and I was in a different school district at the time, I had to start teaching improvisation. So I had to get my game together. So I started really seriously working at it in the way Don taught it. And back then, we were very fortunate that Don, over a period of decades, had run the Bridgeway jazz sessions mm-hmm. on Saturday afternoons for years. And he had a house rhythm section. People could sit in. He would bring.
There was a restaurant.
Yeah, over in South Portland, and would bring in big names. I mean, he's brought in Sonny Stitt and Dick Johnson. He brought Herb up many times, and so I would go learn my tune of the week and go over, and I knew from experience and seeing people go in and flame out. What do you want to play? Let's play All the Things You Are. Great. You sure you know it? Yeah, I know it. What key is it in? Well, it's usually in A flat. Okay, let's do it in B flat. Well, I don't know it in B flat. Well, you just said you knew the tune. If you know the tune,
Mm-hmm.
you know the tune.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go in and I would say, I'd like to do There'll Never Be Another You in the key of E flat. And that's how but it would, it was different for me. And I would get my kids to go and sit in. Well, the kid's a kid. Kid can do anything and still a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was 40 years old. I was expected to know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to go in there and stand in front of a live audience and do it, and I would do it over a period of months, and I got better, and Don would give me suggestions. And then one day I'd play my one tune, get ready to go, sit down. He says, "Hey, wait a minute." He says, "I'll play with you." Gee, that's great. Don's going to play with me. He says, "You're ready." Cherokee, 1, 2, 1, 2. And he kicked it off. And it's like, I was ready to have a nervous breakdown. I mean, I had been practicing it, of course, but never thought I would ever play that in public. And I got through it. And but when Don made that decision, "You're ready." You know, he would never put anybody on the spot. And yeah, he was a master of that. He knew people inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an interesting story about Don and combo that happened at Westbrook. And this is good for younger teachers to know that we got away with some stuff. And Don was not a big fan of in-service days. When I was director of music, I would do anything I could. He would come to school. I would find things for him to do. And I think most music people would say they're not fans of, because we sit there and talk about things that don't relate to us. I think just recently, didn't Caitlin do an in-service day for music teachers when everybody, and I guess it was really
for middle
successful.
schools, yeah, tons of people.
And it just took the initiative. And I think it was so great. I think of all the wasted days and things I've sat through those things. So,
Yep. We got to do one for high school people.
So we had a superintendent that, I can say right up, it wasn't too swift. And he didn't understand the ramifications of messing with the music department in the town of Westbrook. And he made it a point to tell me, "And I want Don Doan at that in-service day." I said, "No, you don't want to do that. That's not a good idea. I'll take you. I insist he be there." Okay. So it's in January. It's cold. We're in the auditorium, the old auditorium. Hard seats. And the first thing out of the guest's mouth is, if you want to be a successful teacher, don't sit your students in a hard chair and lecture to them. I'm thinking, what's this guy doing? Well, I'm sitting in this hard chair being lectured to, and he expects we're going to buy into this. Don lasted about 30 minutes, which was 29 minutes more than I thought he would. And he got up, and I thought he was going to the bathroom or something. After a while, I didn't see him come back. About an hour later, I could hear music, and it was bleeding through from the practice rooms upstairs into the auditorium. And people turning around, kind of saying, "What's that?" Well, then I realized Don had had enough of the workshop. He went in my office and called all the kids in the combo who were home on their day off. They came in to rehearse. So the superintendent was sitting in front of me, and he turned around, really angry at this point. He said, "What's that?" I said, "I think it's blues in B flat." So he told me, he says, I want you to write him up. I said, "What would you like in the commendation?" He said, "Not a commendation. I want a reprimand." I said, "So you want me to reprimand a teacher who got kids to come in on their day off and rehearse so they could learn music?" I said, "You really want to go to war over that one with the boosters and the school board?" And he backed down.
Yeah.
He only lasted 3 years in town anyway. And to this day, I think he thinks the music department's the one that did it. But so for young people, don't be afraid to take chances. I mean, you don't have to be insubordinate in that regard.
Right.
But, and you'll build a culture. That combo culture was great that Don had built. And he never went to the festival. We'd take the kids. Don didn't have time to go to the festivals. The kids ran themselves, basically.
Yep. So bands play too loud. We talked a lot about improvisation. What else do we hear from bands?
Could make better choices in charts.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to do a second part here where we talk a lot about your charts, great writers, approaches for charts.
Right. There's so much more material out here now.
Things band directors can do with their own bands to write and arrange for their own
Oh,
band.
absolutely.
Yep.
When I first started to teach, and if you did middle school jazz band, which there wasn't much of it back then, the literature if there was any for that level, it wasn't very good. It was more like pop music and stuff. You had to find easy high school level literature. There was a lot coming out for high school jazz bands, but not really for middle school. And we didn't have middle school jazz festivals. And when they started to have those, they were more like gladiator wars. So I didn't really want to get into the middle of that. So
programming.
Yeah, it's everything. And that's phone calls and emails.
And mistakes, making mistakes and learning from mistakes.
Oh, sure.
Learning from them, not doing them over and over again.
Picking a great chart for the wrong band.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's just, again, in September, you have these grandiose ideas of where your group's going to be. And as we all know, things happen.
Yeah.
And make music. Don't worry where they can hit the high notes and play all the bazillion notes in a sax solo. And talk to people. We've sat at festivals where I've heard the same chart played by 9 bands. And it's a great chart. But put yourself in my position. I've just heard 9 versions of this chart and of all the literature that's out there. And that could have been avoided by just some people chatting. And, oh, I know so-and-so's doing this chart. And so-and-so's, maybe I'll head in a different direction. Or talk to an adjudicator. Say, what are the charts that are always played there? I want to kind of avoid those and, do something else.
All right. So let's end this episode with a teaser. Okay. So what is a great chart that is great teaching material? One great chart.
Mark Taylor's chart on Bye Bye Blackbird from middle school, and you could even use it at a high school level.
Is that the one with the piano solo in the middle?
All I remember is the one, doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle, that one. It's like a grade 2 or so, but it teaches, you can play that chart and you learn to lay back, then you've learned the style. It's a great chart.
Okay.
And if a high school group could do it just for teaching style and not have to spend a lot of time chasing the notes.
I love quote unquote middle school charts because you can just make music right away.
Sure.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. I hope everybody tunes into part 2.
Cool.
Any final words?
Collaboration. That's the thing, especially if you're younger. It's not that we old guys have all the answers. We've screwed up enough and got away with it that we could help you not do those same things.
And again, the easiest way for people to reach out to you is through your website?
Email.
What's your email?
twhite1, the number 1, at mainthestate.rr.com.
Yeah. Or they could go to growingband.com and I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and my website has the email on it as well. And it's not just me. I mean, there's a lot of people in my position that are willing to help. It's all about giving back from someone like me. People gave to me, and a lot of people had a lot of patience with me growing up, and so hopefully I can pass some things on back. So
great, nice seeing you.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, be well, everybody. We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.